I want you to keep in mind how you picture Jesus to be as a regular person. Because Jesus grew up a human just like the rest of us. So obviously he has emotions that he shows. And I think some of the things that he says today and does will reflect a kind of a little human side to him, where he's not just this, what we might picture as a stoic person with no emotions. I guess I can't picture anybody that I've known that doesn't show at least a little, maybe humor sometimes, or reflects his feelings in what he says and what he does. So keep that in mind today as we're going through a couple of things. Now to begin with, this discussion takes place after the leaders of the Jewish religion came up from Jerusalem. They've heard a lot about Jesus. And they came from Jerusalem to question and to observe what was going on. And they noticed that the disciples did not wash their hands before they were eating. And to the scribes and Pharisees, this made them unclean. How dare they? They were sinful. They were, that was against the rules and regulations of the Jewish religion. And Jesus' reply is where we started here. He rebuked them and told them that this idea of washing your hands is something that you have elevated to the point where it is based on faith and your religion, and it has nothing to do with that at all. And he kind of scolded at them a little bit. And this is where the disciples replied, well, you hurt their feelings. And this is where the discussion takes place. And it's also at this point where this happens to take place in the beginning of about the third year of Jesus' ministry. And it's known as the year of opposition. This is the year leading up to Jesus going to Jerusalem and taking on and fulfilling the scriptures. Again, most of his ministry has been in the northern part of the kingdom. He has not ventured toward Jerusalem at all. And he's building up his kingdom there on the northern part. And this is the year that a lot of opposition starts coming towards Jesus. And where the scribes and the Pharisees are starting to build a case against getting rid of Jesus. So, I go back now to, let's say, the last time I did this sermon, a month ago. What was the topic of our discussion? Go out and weed. Go out and weed your garden. Because remember, we said within the field of wheat, there was a weed that looked exactly like it, and they wanted to pull the weeds out. And Jesus said, no, wait until it matures, and then you can tell the difference. That's like going into the garden. You've got a lot of weeds, you can't tell what they are until the flowers bloom. Then you can clean them up. And Jesus makes reference to that here again. Where is the verse? He says something, come on. Oh, right there. In the 13th verse. Every plant which my Father in heaven did not plant will be pulled up. Again, he's talking about weeding. And when we said weeding, it was not necessarily the people that are causing us the problem, but it is all the things about us that cause us to sin. In this case, he might be referencing people a little bit, pulling up the weeds. And the last time, I regretted not having pictures, but I have pictures this time. And I made mention that my mom is a diligent gardener. She works hard at her garden. She's out there every day weeding, keeping her garden these flowers to bloom. I wanted to share those pictures because they're pretty awesome what she does for an 89-year-old woman. So let's see your pictures. That's one angle of her garden. And then another side of the garden. That's pretty much what she loves to do. So you can see, once you take care of the weeds, things really bloom and everything is just wonderful. But we have to take the time to do the weeding and to take care of those things that conflict with us. Now, Jesus goes on, and Peter speaks up. Well, actually, the disciples bring up this discussion. Explain to us what all this means. Now, here's where you think of the human side of Jesus a little bit. What's his reply? Now, you read different texts, and it comes up different ways. Jesus said to them, "You are still no more intelligent than others." It's kind of like scolding him. After he's been with him for how many years? Well, a couple of years anyway. They've been on the ministry. He says, "You still don't understand. What is it going to take to get through this? Are you that dull that you can't understand this?" It's that kind of a frustration that Jesus is using right now and trying to be as polite as he can. And then he goes on to explain. It's not what you eat, but what comes out of your mouth. For out of your mouth comes from what's from the heart. And some people will say, well, they say unclean. Well, that was a term they used for people that had, at times, an illness in the biblical times. They would say, that person is unclean, stay away from him. And he uses this term unclean a lot in this area. This does not make you unclean. Washing your hands doesn't make you unclean. So after explaining all this, and mind you now, he's been under a lot of, I don't want to say pressure, but he's been doing an awful lot. This is right after he fed the 5,000, and he walked on the water. He's been very active in his ministry. And from time to time, Jesus tries to get away. So, I got a pointer this time. I don't have to use a mop handle this time. I got a pointer stick. Okay, so I have some maps we're going to show again here. And I'm going to kind of set this up for what's coming up in the next story part. Okay? All right, so all of this area here, prior to it becoming Judah and Israel, was an area known as Canaan. And when the Israelites were in Egypt, this area was inhabited by these Canaanites. And they were a pagan, worshiping tribe of people that, it was just one of those things that God didn't want them there. That was the promised land. So when the Israelites came up out of Egypt, now of course they could have come from Egypt straight up this way and into there, but it didn't work that way because the Israelites were a bunch of naughty people. So Jesus had them wandering around a little, or God had them going around a little bit here for about 40 years before they had a chance to get up into there. And when they did, they came through this way. And right here is Jericho. The Battle of Jericho. That started the takeover of the land, getting rid of the Canaanites, which God ordered them to do. In fact, he said, annihilate them. Well, not all of them were annihilated. But the Israelites came in and took over this area and split it up between the 12 tribes. And this was all belonging to the Israelites. And the Canaanite people kind of ventured way north. Way up north. Okay, up in the area. Okay, next slide. This is a little map of a blow-up of that northern part there a little bit. Right in here, Capernaum. Remember the Sea of Galilee? That was where Jesus was basically headquartered during his ministry, was right up in that area. Well, after walking on the water and the feeding of the 5,000, he wanted to get away. So they ventured north. Way up there is Tyre. Sidon is a little farther north. But this is the area that he went up into. In that area up in there were remnants of the Canaanite people, but they were also influenced by Greek philosophy. There were also Jews up in that area. So his idea was to go up there, try to minister to the Jews, but also maybe step up there and let them know that the words were meant for the Gentiles, the Canaanite people as well. So when he got to that place, this woman came up to him. "Son of David," she cried, "have mercy on me. My daughter has a demon and is in a terrible condition." Now, Jesus didn't say a word to her. He said, "Well, other people around," but she was very outspoken. Didn't say a word. The disciples begged, "Send her away. She's following us, making a lot of noise." Okay? "I have been sent only to the lost sheep of the people of Israel." That's what he wanted to minister to first and foremost, were the people of Israel, to establish further his kingdom and to expand that kingdom up in that northern area. At this, the woman fell down. "Help me, sir." And she begged all the more. Usually when a person falls down at somebody's feet, it's usually in response to someone they're paying homage to. She fell down at his feet and was begging, just trying to get his attention, more or less just glorifying Jesus a little bit through her motions. Well, when she did this, Jesus said, "It isn't right to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." That's a nasty term, dogs. In some religions, if you're not a part of that religion, you're a dog. That was a reference to the Gentiles by the Jewish people. If you weren't Jewish, you were a dog. Kind of a nasty term. But dogs sometimes weren't highly favored in some traditional cultures. Of course, they all had pet dogs wandering around, okay? But it was a way that Jesus said it. Do you think he would say it in a nasty way? Or think in terms of some of you who are grandparents, teachers, maybe even parents do it too. When you're trying to teach a lesson, don't you from time to time have a catchy little phrase, and you say it with a twinkle in your eye to see what kind of response you get? Don't you? How many have done that before? Yeah. You're not being mean. You're kind of chuckling to see what kind of response you're going to get. So think of Jesus saying it that way. And this woman snapped out an answer just like that. She didn't even have to think about that. She made this comment. "That's true, sir, but even the dogs eat the leftovers that fall from the mouth." master's table. Whoa. So what was the crumbs? What was the dogs eating? What was this supposed to represent? Well, Jesus was saying that the children's food is referring to his word, to his message that he was giving to the children of Israel. He was giving that message to uplift the kingdom of God. But yet here comes this Gentile woman who really just knew about Jesus, but really didn't have any worship experience with him or followed him, came to him begging this, begging for some food, shall we say, begging for a word of help. And Jesus was more inclined to say, no, I'm giving it for my children of Israel, but there's going to be crumbs, little morsels, little tidbits of wisdom, of words, of encouragement that this lady was looking for. And that's when she replied, well, even the leftovers fall from the master's table, and the dogs get them. Woman, you are of great faith. Ha! A seed was planted. What's our seed? Last time I said that the seed that you receive is what you receive at baptism. You were received as a child of God at baptism. And then we go out and try to nourish that seed. We have to do some weeding. We have to take care of the garden. But this woman had a seed planted in her. And she took that seed, acknowledged Jesus, took it in, and he says, you woman of great faith, what you want will be done. And the daughter was healed. Now, the text says that the woman's daughter was demon-possessed. In some texts, it said she was with a sickness. Which one? I see more demon-possessed than I do sickness. But there was an illness. There was something there that was bothering her. Something that made her unclean. And if you look at some of the Bible texts, it didn't happen on this. But the one Bible I was using, it had the word unclean in quotation marks. Every time the word unclean came up in this text, well, that doesn't make you unclean. Because remember, unclean meant there was something, a sickness or something like that. But he was trying to get across that we are all unclean, that we could be unclean. In fact, we all have a sickness of some sort. And what is that sickness?
Sin. It's sin.
There we go. Sin. Sin is our sickness. Sure, we might have physical ailments, we might have other things. But all have sinned and come short to the glory of God. We confess that we are by nature sinful and unclean. We claim it ourselves when we confess we have sinned. And this pertains to everybody. In fact, if you look at the middle of that word, I am in the midst of my sin. Sin is all around me. And we confess that we are unclean. So when we go to God and ask for forgiveness, the cure for that is our next word. Faith. in the middle of that word?
Uh,
I. I am in the midst of my faith. My faith brings me through. In Romans, but what does it say? The word is near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith we are proclaiming. That if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And in Ephesians, for it is by grace you have been saved through your faith. So yet, though we are all unclean in some shape or form, it is through our faith. And if we have the faith as that Canaanite woman had, just a morsel, just a crumb off the table of the master. It even says in the Bible, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, which is a tiny little seed. Oh, no, I'm planting some of these seeds. Boy, they are small. But what they grow up to be is pretty awesome. If we have that kind of a faith, and if we take the time to weed our gardens, quotation mark gardens, your garden, you take the time to weed, by grace you are saved through your faith. To close off the sermon, I'd like you to join in the next hymn called Healer of Our Every Ill. I think we've done it before. If you're not that familiar with it, at least, the chorus is easy to pick up on, but focus on the words because it really wraps up things in a great, wonderful way here.